So we are in this swamp, this fen, north of London. And we are somewhere in a southern direction from the four of you. Grey Rat is passing through the foliage of the fen, and we see him as he's making his way through this bog. And the nightlife of the marsh is active all around them, or all around him rather. We see the tall, encompassing cypress trees that protrude from the many pools of stagnant water and the overall inescapable wet of the environment brushing against him. Can you go ahead and describe Grey Rat? What's he doing? What's his plan?
Certainly. Grey Rat currently south or north to the city to report everything that has happened this night, all the goings to his sire, and kind of leak some of that information into the Nosferatu network.
Alright, and the four of you that got left behind, although perhaps you did or perhaps you didn't notice that Grey Rat had left, there's certainly no mark of precisely which direction he went after that. You know you are walking at least in the direction that he went, but there is no sign of him after that, which is odd. But we are going to stay focused on Grey Rat for the moment. And actually, Grey Rat, if you could roll a Perception Alertness, difficulty 6. Okay. I'm going to do a thing. So, as you're making your way through the foliage of the fen, you come to a clearing. You see that you are past the marsh, or at least the edge of it, and you can see the walls of London. You can see there's a lot of activity upon the walls, torches moving around, likely in response to the attack or whatever is happening just to the west of London. It's probably less than a mile away, but as soon as you step out of this marsh, you notice at the last moment there is someone behind you.
Grey Rat is going to quickly spin around to see who is right behind him.
Alright. You will immediately recognize this person. Once I get him up. So you see the face of the Brujah you recognize as Ford. And he sees that you've noticed him, which actually catches him by surprise. But he's resolute anyway. You hear his disgusting, deranged voice mutter out, "Stop where you are, Prior." His stuttering and deranged voice is familiar. Ford, you remember, is the hound to the sheriff, and his countenance is so visceral and savage he is sometimes mistaken as being a gangrel, or sometimes even a Nosferatu, like yourself. So thoroughly has the beast within him come to the surface, and his stuttering is known by all, but none dare make jest of it due to the rumors of his brutality and the alleged service to the prince in removing unwanted individuals with ruthless efficiency. And his reputation for this vicious nature is matched only by his unparalleled tracking skills. You are wanted by the sheriff and must come with me.
Greyrat has slipped a hand inside his robes, and it seems to be clutching a dagger, though he hides this very well. He kind of takes a moment to move his head back and forth, examining Ford, and underneath the heavy steel mask, he utters, "Under what charge?"
You see a sinister grin creep across this creature's face, as though he was hoping you would challenge him. I need no charge. Prior, you are to come with me. And you see now that he has a crossbow in his hand, though it is lowered because you turned around so quickly. He did not have time to raise it.
Greyrat will slowly adjust himself. Very well. As his deformed, gnarled hand outstretches, lead the way.
Oh, no. You keep walking towards the city. And he motions to the wall that is visible now.
Can I still see groups of people and commotion and things happening over there?
So the wall of London and the gate that is visible, the portcullis is closed, but you can see, what you see is the distant moving of torches back and forth across the wall, as though there is activity maybe by sentries. They're just out of earshot, though.
Okay. Greyrat is gonna examine the wall and then look back to Ford. I apologize, Master Ford, as he slightly does a small bow, but I must take extra precaution when it comes to mortals and the seeing of me. I am not as pretty as you are.
A grimace appears on Ford's face as you perhaps said something that he is not terribly happy about. You let us worry about that.
Greyrat is sizing Ford up as he's holding the crossbow. He kind of lets out a small shrug with his deformed hands before they vanish again within his robes. As you wish. And then he'll slowly turn and begin walking towards the wall.
Right. Ford, almost looking disappointed that you didn't put up a greater fight, lowers his crossbow again and follows after you as the two of you start walking towards the gate, the nearest gate. And it is right about this time that the four other surviving vampires begin to emerge into the clearing. And the four of you... Well, let's see. Why don't you give me a perception alertness difficulty 5? From just the 4 coming in now.
One second, I'm gonna set up a macro for this. Okay,
Right. Okay. And actually all 3 of you notice something as you emerge from this forest.
As Galfred slugs his way out of the fen, looking slightly irritated at their more natural surroundings. He's a man of libraries and learning. This is not his sort of environment that he favors. But nonetheless, he is followed after with the group, and as his sharp eyes pick out through the dark, Grey Rat moving in the distance, he's going to use Auspex to sharpen his vision to see if he can see who it is that has the crossbow trained on him.
as soon as you start doing that, Daborah seems to suddenly stop moving. I mean, she'd been moving kind of awkwardly. She's clearly not used to walking around in the swamp and all that, but she had been resolute, and she suddenly stops moving and gestures as if for everyone to be silent. And she kind of peers in the distance ahead, and then she whispers, "I don't know who that is, but the other person is Grey Rat. Shall we follow?"
I believe this matter can be resolved simply enough. Galfred speaks, breaking his silence, as of course he's kept quite an interminable silence ever since fleeing the attack on the meeting. He's finally spoke up now, however, and from a distance, about how far away am I from the monstrous-looking man?
A few hundred feet, perhaps. They haven't noticed that the 4 of you exit yet.
Okay. But I can still very clearly see the weapon that he has trained on Grey Rat, yes?
Yes.
And kneeling down, his gleaming eyes in the dark, staring at the two off in the distance, Galfred begins murmuring softly. He's moving his hands as though casting something, as he evokes the power of his blood and begins to seize control of that crossbow. He actually is going to use his thaumaturgy.
Okay. believe that's a willpower roll.
Correct. And he has no intention of manipulating the crossbow for any amount of time. His only desire is to yank it from the hand of the man and throw it off into the darkness, just to simply remove the weapon from the man's hand. Yeah, from this great distance, he trusts he won't be spotted.
Grey Rat, you hear a shriek from behind you. What? This sudden outburst and spasmodic sound from behind you. You see that the crossbow that Ford was holding is in the air and falling quite a ways, quite far away, as if he had thrown it himself.
Hundreds of yards away, Gulfred the Ipswich rises from his kneeling posture and gives a faint, sinister smirk as his eyes narrow, his bald, shaven skull gleaming in the moonlight that filters down overhead, glancing at the others near him. Now we may do the rest at our leisure.
Daborah will whisper back, "Sorcerer." It seems to be more a phrase of recognition than critique or acclaim.
Gulfred inclines his head but says nothing.
You would notice, Galfred, that once this man seems to freak out and lose control of his crossbow, after a moment his eyes turn to the forest and they find you and the four of you. Despite how far you are, somehow this man has homed into your location. Grey Rat, you hear Ford speak up as he pulls a dagger out. Who is that? Do you know them? Are they survivors?
Can we hear that at all from our distance?
You might hear some voice. He's not speaking very loud. Daniel, if you're talking, you're muted.
Oh, okay. Grey Rat is going to be paying very close attention to Ford. He's going to start moving softly and quietly behind him, and the second Ford tries to look away, Grey Rat is going to try and use obfuscate.
Well, he has his eyes right on you. He's
Okay.
pointing in the direction that he saw the people that you would immediately recognize as that. There's no other explanation. Those are the four survivors you left.
Yeah. Okay, Grey Rat is going to try and move and position himself right behind Ford so that he has to keep his eyes on Grey Rat. I know them not, as he begins to slowly move off to the side.
Roll your... Go with wits. Wits, legerdemain. Difficulty 6.
Do I roll those 10s again?
Yeah, you can reroll those 10s. Yeah, he keeps his gaze locked on you. He does not appear to be aware of what you're doing. Well, do you not know them? I don't understand. This shouldn't have been so confusing.
I'm sure they are no match for the hound of the sheriff. He continues to move, now placing the group at 180 degrees around him, completely at his back.
What is he doing? Galfred murmurs softly, watching the two from the distance.
How is Tito reacting to any of this?
Tito is taking note of what is happening. I know not what they are doing from this distance, but it does seem they are talking.
Daborah will try and block out much of the noises of the surrounding swampland, and try and not get blinded by the torches on the wall flickering, which always stirs something uncomfortable in, the pit of her stomach. And she'll try and hone in her awareness of the people ahead of her, trying to make out what is said, although it is said softly. Auspex, I am not sure whether actually your Auspex rating matters for enhanced senses, so I'll leave the resolution to you.
Yeah, what you can do is it would be hard to make out what they're saying if you did not have Auspex, because they're speaking in common conversational tones. But make a private perception alertness roll, difficulty 8 minus your Auspex.
I
Okay.
am not sure how to interpret that.
You didn't botch. You got one success. You just can't hear. There's too much nightlife behind you. There's nightlife across the way. Bugs chirping, owls. You just can't make out what's being said.
Daborah seems perturbed by the whole scene. This is not a natural surrounding for her, much as it may be for other people. And she tries to shake something off as if, there's something crawling on the shoulder, and she just seems ill at ease and baffled. And she will slink back and just try and, regain her composure.
Well, we can do nothing meaningful from over here, Galfred says softly as he begins to walk forward, and he is going to try and move as stealthily as possible around to the side of this monstrous-looking man to try and flank him and perhaps remain out of his field of vision. Galfred is no great sneak thief, but he does have certain skills he's developed as a vampire.
Yeah, it's a few hundred feet, but that's not a terrible distance for a vampire to cover in a number of seconds. So try a dexterity stealth. Difficulty is going to be 5. He has his gaze focused on somebody else.
Bending at the knees and moving silently, using his cloak as help against the darkness, Galfred keeps his head low and moves closer, sharpening his hearing with his Auspex to better understand what is being exchanged between Grey Rat and the monstrous man.
Okay. You move. You close a lot of that distance very quietly, and through some of the brush, some of the high-rising grass actually helps conceal you as you move, much aided by Grey Rat's distraction. And I would say you've covered enough distance that you could make a perception alertness difficulty 6 minus your aspects to hear what they're saying now. What do Tito and Daborah do as they see Galfred quietly sneak off to try and get behind this man?
Oh, whose attention does it seem that Ford is focused on right now?
Ford is very focused on Grey Rat right now.
Am I correct that at the moment Ford is in between us and Grey Rat, so if he's focused on Grey Rat, we are right in his back?
Yes.
Okay. In that case, Daborah, after a few seconds of awkward indecision, will do her best to move after Tito and stay quiet. But she'll do her best.
Is Tito also trying to sneak up?
Sorry, I didn't mean Tito.
Okay.
I meant
Galfred.
Galfred, yes.
Right.
Sorry.
You can try a Dex Stealth, also difficulty 5.
Let's see. Am I correct that since it is a skill and untrained, the difficulty goes up by 1?
Correct. And what is Tito doing?
Tito will...
Wow. Okay, let me roll the 10s again.
Tito may as well follow behind.
Okay. Yes. Daborah, you make it look very easy. You are just as skilled at moving amidst the leaves quietly and gracefully, following behind Galfred. And Tito, you can also try your Dex Stealth, difficulty 5, unless you don't have Stealth. If you are going to follow.
I do, okay.
Although it is probably not audible to anyone, Daborah will be thinking of one person who would be surprisingly proud of her here. She didn't expect that it would be this easy.
Mm-hmm. And again, we'll try and keep those out of character thoughts in text chat.
Oh.
But yes, Tito, you definitely you follow right behind, and so the three of you begin to quietly move ever closer towards this man, which Galfred would not recognize, but as the two of you definitely got closer, you would recognize as Ford, having been out and about in this city long enough now to know him. Meanwhile, as these three vampires move quietly, Ford has been trying to command Grey Rat back into line. I have specific orders to not let the Nosferatu out of my sight. I know how you like to slip away. Now you will come with me. I am not waiting to find out who took my crossbow.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Grey Rat shows his hands as they emerge from his robes once again, held up in a helpless manner. I am right here. You are the one who delays. If you are, and Grey Rat continues, this time continuing to try and keep the conversation going. If you are truly here to just fetch me, and the sheriff wishes to see me, he is but to ask, why the crossbow at all?
Because I have full leeway to defend myself if I feel threatened.
Threatened? Grey Rat seems to ponder this. Surely not for me. He places his hands on his chest. I am but a humble servant.
Sorry, guys, getting the results of a roll. Galfred makes his move, emerging from the shadows, stepping directly into the periphery of Ford's vision and walking out of the fen with mud still slick upon his boots, his cloak billowing around his footsteps as he approaches, with both hands steepled together, his pale fingers crossed as he approaches the hound, with no obvious violent intent, merely looking at him. Good evening.
Grey Rat, you see that the startled Ford makes an almost imperceivably fast motion to move around you, so that both you and this person behind him are now in front of him. He has circled halfway around you in a split second. His knife is still out, but now he sees Galfred behind you.
Galfred smirks, leering at him. He's going to try and use his sudden materializing to try and press home an intimidation towards Ford. I believe I heard you were referring to yourself as a hound of the sheriff. Is that correct?
I don't recognize you. Where are you from?
Galfred sweeps low in a bow at the waist, very courtly and almost dramatic for this wilderness surrounding. Galfred Ipswich, clan and house Tremere. I am a recent member of this city and of the prince's court. However, I have studied the traditions extensively, and if I recall correctly, the authority of a hound comes directly from a sheriff, and if a situation is in flux, the hound loses that authority until the sheriff himself appears. Your warrant to claim this Nosferatu, has no right over him, not without the sheriff's direct presence. So long as the Nosferatu, and Galfred turns to look at Grey Rat almost thoughtfully, promises to appear of his own volition before the sheriff, then you cannot compel him to go.
A confused and enraged look appears on Ford as the knife in his hand, as he holds it out, is shaking and trembling. You can see his mouth is widening, and he looks like he's about to scream. I do not remember this rule. He holds his knife out directly towards you. It is around this time that something else happens. I'm going to change the scene a little bit. So, okay. It is around this time that a figure emerges that simply wasn't there before. Not very far away, maybe 20 yards close to the city and approaching from the gate, but now visible to all, and with two men at his side. This man coming forward to the group of you all is walking with purpose. He's an exceptionally tall, towering man, clad lightly in armor and some chain. You can see as he approaches there is a claymore strapped to his back, and you all recognize, well, all but Galfred recognize this man as he becomes visible. Sheriff Jack Timbers appears. He has the look of a wild man, or perhaps a barbarian raider. And with his history and past being something of a mystery, both are possible. He has a savage and dauntless expression tonight, like most nights, but tonight its gaze bores into the group of you. And at first you only see the two men whom you see are actually armed knights accompanying him, but 8 more quickly come out from the gates and move at exceptional speed, nearly at the speed that Ford moved, to catch up to Sheriff Timbers and his guards. They move quickly around you all. They're wearing what appear to be white cloaks with their own chainmail under long white surcoats and a small red cross above their heart. Faces concealed by full plate helmets with closed visors. These knights very quickly close rank around you, facing in, but not with swords at their sides, but stakes in their hands. And as the sheriff comes closer, you hear him speak up. "Well then, I guess it's a good time for me to appear, as you start to cite the law, as you seem to be so informed on it. I am here, and I am enforcing the will of the prince, and by order of Prince Adam, you lot are to come with me. I'll say this only once. You will put down whatever weapons you have brought, or you will be put down.
Daborah will make a great show of offering about a 3-inch penknife.
On what charge are we being brought before the Prince, Sheriff? Galfred speaks up, keeping his relative cool and calm.
The sheriff looks at you sidelong, as if not immediately recognizing you, but perhaps remembering something. No, you're new. But I don't like Tremere. I'm gonna ignore you asking me that question. If you know what title I hold, you know that I can bring you in for damn well anything.
I know very well what title you hold, Galfred says coolly. And you also know very well what title my masters hold, and my ability to communicate with them. I only say to this as a humble and most groveling servant of Clan and House Tremere, that you would do well not to anger them.
If you want to try and talk politics with me, save it. Can have your elders and your sires speak with Genevieve Silvers. I won't have it. I'm just here to finish this job. My job is to bring you to the Tower of London.
Then I submit. Galfred folds his arms.
And the rest of you?
Tito nods and makes a showing that he'll come along.
How is Grey Rat reacting to this?
Grey Rat does a very slow head roll as the mask that he is wearing stares down the sheriff and the two men at his side, sizing them up from head to toe. He simply, after a moment of stoicism, shrugs and throws out his deformed hands before they vanish again in his robes. I was never unwilling, just weary of the skittish man holding the knife.
You see that Ford has a terribly crooked smile with his terrible protruding rotten teeth showing. He seems extremely satisfied to be seeing the sheriff. And now you have to listen to me.
A word of advice, as he cricks his head to the sheriff when bringing in someone for questioning, or he waves his hand again, whatever this is. Maybe try a little more carrot than stick next time.
When you're sheriff, you can decide exactly how you want to police London. Until then, I don't care about your opinions.
I will remember you said that. As he does a small bow and... Please. Shall I lead the way?
Daborah will fall into step, and when at some point when she is relatively close to the sheriff, you know, where you can speak in a soft voice, she will say, "Please remember that I hold domain in the city by the grace of the prince." And she will otherwise calmly follow along.
When it becomes evident that you are not resisting, and the various weapons you have are collected, including John, who did end up following, and he relinquishes his blade. The weapons what few there are collected by the knights, and they continue to form rank. They keep this formation around you as you are escorted towards the gate, with Sheriff Timbers at the lead. The answer a couple PMs.
As they collect the weapons, Grey Rat is going to kind of speak up when they seem to think they're all done. Do you mean all of our weapons?
At this, the sheriff stops and gives you an angry look. Are there more?
A small laugh and breaths of breathing underneath the steel mask he's wearing. There's always more. As he reaches, it seems he's fumbling within his robes. He pulls out one dagger, and then he pulls out another curved dagger, and then he reaches in and pulls out two more curved daggers and holds them out. I would like them back at some point.
There aren't any more survivors we're missing, are there?
Galfred remains silent, his dark eyes taking in his surroundings.
I don't remember. As Grey Rat hands over the last of his daggers.
You will. He
Not
turns.
many survived.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Not many survived.
The sheriff continues to... He resumes leading. And you are walked past the gate. You see now that the streets have been cleared of whatever kind there were out here. There seem to be guards posted along the street every intersection or two, maintaining some kind of perimeter, but there are no real kind to speak of. And so you are escorted down the windy streets of London. The cluttered multi-story buildings all huddled together seem to peer out at you as they overhang. The density of the town is made even more evident by the design of the streets, apparently more by accident of rapid growth and less by careful planning. Windy alleyways and dead-end streets seem endless. And even without these guards posted, it is late and few people are still on the streets. And you see that none are being allowed very close. What few there are not being allowed very close to see, even get a glimpse of Grey Rat. Is anyone saying anything or speaking up while you're escorted through the city?
Galfred does not say anything. Does it take about, do I have at least 10 minutes during this walk?
Yes. I would say yes.
Then Galfred does not speak with anyone. In fact, he keeps his eyes quite forward as if in a trance, walking with very determined and methodical precision as he is turning over something in his hand, a token of some kind, very clearly somewhere else as they walk along the streets of London.
How is Tito reacting to this? Does he fall silent or...
At this moment, Tito will... just fall silent and continue walking, as it seems explanations are not going to be given.
At first, Daborah will be quiet and just following along. Seem to be musing about something. After a while, she will address the sheriff and ask, since it seems that our presence has been pressed upon you by accident, but you were probably not looking for us, whom all are being brought in so that we know of whom we have the benevolent company?
The sheriff either doesn't hear you, ignores you, or chooses not to answer.
She will not repeat it and just keep following along.
And Grey Rat?
Grey Rat is seemingly very slow. He seems to be walking abnormally, perhaps on purpose to delay a short time. But he keeps quiet. He seems to be trying to keep pace with the sheriff and his very broad strokes and ways of walking. He seems to be trying to keep up with them.
Okay, and after some time you arrive at the first gate of the Tower of London, where another portcullis is being raised, and you can see the deep moat surrounding the rest of the curtain wall containing the exterior of the castle. This portcullis gate entrance is apparently the only way over the moat. And it's visible even at night how many guards are alert right now, standing watch, bows at hand, at the walls, the fortifications, and the parapets overlooking you as you pass by. With the portcullis raised, you are led further inside. Past this point, you find the second curtain wall, further insulating the white tower at the center. The paths fork, and you are led along one of these paths. And again, you see more men lining these walls, watching you. The torches lighting the inside of this castle are infrequent. Eventually, you make your way to a round-walled building that protrudes slightly out of the secondary curtain wall, but it opens up into a downward staircase beneath, and you are led beneath this rounded building. An armed guard standing by opens a metal door to this building for the sheriff and the group of you along with the escort to enter. And with that, I'm going to change things. Once inside, you are led down a spiral staircase deeper into the ground, further from prying eyes, and finally into a hallway that forks both left and right. You can hear immediately as you approach this fork the tortured moans echoing through the stone halls from some distant, god-forsaken dungeon. And you all truly sense that only in a place like this could you feel so very removed from hope. But you are not led down to the right. You are led much much to your grace, perhaps down this much narrower hall to the left and through another metal door. This opens to a large stone room with metal prison cells in them, lining the left and right walls. And you are each guided into a separate cell, but they are simple constructions. You are all visible to each other, really just bars of metal in their simplest design. There are no windows in this cell. The walls are grimy, old, and unclean. You can see that there are smears of human feces and blood. There's hair on the cold stone floor and grease. Some of the waste buckets and pots have not been emptied from the cells you enter. Some are tipped over, spewing their contents. The old Norman graffiti sits upon one of these walls and looks down upon you. The cells themselves are mostly bare, apparently designed with the expectation that prisoners using them would not need them for long. A very small amount of light is provided by just a few sconce torches on either end of the room, and you realize the cells you are all in are arranged in a row, 5 on one side and 5 on the other. Go ahead.
I would actually Daborah would not enter a cell. She would stop at the entrance, address the people escorting her, and say, "I believe that as a member of Clan Toreador in good standing and with domain in the city, I deserve better treatment than this."
You are interrupted and pushed into the cell by one of these large hulking knights.
Okay.
Make a dexterity athletics to not fall as you are pushed in. Unless you want to try and resist.
Yes, I will resist, certainly.
Okay.
Presence?
You
Just
can try. Depends on how you want to go about doing that.
Well, she called upon Clan Toreador, which is one of the high clans. She claimed that she had domain in the city. So she will try and impress upon them that they are well stepping out of line by, kind of reinforcing the point with a bit more glamour.
Okay. Roll your, believe it is Charisma Performance difficulty 7.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that? Yeah. Roll that out.
Would that be public or storyteller dice?
That would be social, so that'd be public.
Well then.
Yep, you can re-roll that 10. Alright, and so the goal of your drawing attention was to
impress upon them that they are perhaps dealing with people more important than they were led to believe, so that they allow us perhaps a better situation than these cells would account for.
The man who was going to push you in stops just short of reaching you. You feel him tap you, but as your words penetrate him, he stops. Several of the other knights from this contingent brought out are putting the other 4 of you in cells, but Sheriff Timbers, standing back and watching, sees this. He walks forward looking irritated, and he basically forces denial of space. He basically walks into you until you are backed into the cell. Are you going to try and resist him?
She will she will look past the sheriff and address the knights. And she will say, "Please note how we have been treated. We are rightful citizens of the domain. This is not how the traditions are enforced." And then she will step into the cell.
Most of the knights are just putting the other four away. They haven't taken notice. They don't even look your way, except for the one you stopped who is looking at you. You can't see his face. He has a closed visor, but you get the impression that you have swayed him, or perhaps made a pause in his thinking. And the sheriff looks frustrated as he basically pushes this knight out of the way to close your cell door. "Off with you." He sends this knight away. "Don't try that again."
Likewise.
So, before I go on, was anybody else planning on trying to stop? You all saw that Daborah had some success. She initially stopped one of these knights from pushing her in. Is anyone else going to resist them being put in cells?
Galfred does not resist.
Yeah, Grey Rat will walk willingly into one of the cells, and then as soon as he is on the other side, he will just turn and stand, and the very unsettling look of a man garbed in pure black with a leper's mask will just stare at the knight putting him in.
And your two emotionless faces meet, and the knight, despite most of them seeming to have no personality, his emotionless, affect-free helmet does linger on you as you stare back at him before he finally turns. How's Tito reacting to this?
Tito will enter a cell.
Okay. John is also willingly put into a cell near the front of the room. So the five of you are in a row with each other, facing 5 empty cells across the room, just as dirty as yours, though empty. And once all of you have been locked away, and the sheriff seems satisfied, he sends his contingent back out the door and turns to address you all. "Do not try anything foolish." And he looks specifically at Daborah again. And he turns to leave without another word.
As he leaves, Grey Rat will slowly take a seat. "You have done all the foolish talk for us."
He stops just short of the door, but he does not turn, and a moment later he continues.
Grey Rat seems very comfortable in his cell. He does not seem very worried, although he does not seem very much of anything with the mask and his garb.
Alright, and so the 5 of you are kind of left together in this darkness, this dark, damp, dreary cell.
If anyone is able to see into Galfred's cell, he has actually removed the talisman from around his neck, which most of the time is hidden beneath his cloak, and actually pricking the tips of his fingers, he has begun to draw arcane glyphs into the talisman while whispering beneath his breath in a language probably none of you recognize, but he seems focused upon the talisman in his hand, not particularly looking up at anyone else in his cell.
How's Tito handling his incarceration with these unlikely companions? Oh, I just got your PM. Doing some rolls. In the meantime, how is Daborah doing anything in her cell? It is very far beneath what she is used to. You really can't even sit on the floor without touching some fluid.
Yeah, she will initially at least stay standing, and if that becomes too monotonous, she will lean against the cell door, in fact. Looking around her fellow incarcerated, so to speak, she'll say, well, I hope that my little speech at least carried weight with the vanguard. But I felt that it was important we took our chances to get the news out there that at least some people were held here, so that someone perhaps in a position of more power will show interest. The problem is not being incarcerated, the problem is that no one knows it.
They know it. The voice comes from Galfred's cell, as he seems to have finished his whispering, and if anyone can see into his cell, he has actually donned his amulet once more, hiding it beneath his cloak. The wound on his fingertip actually closing up. I have already sent word to my masters. They are aware that I am here at least.
The sheriff gave the impression that such was a mixed blessing and perhaps not a surprise to them.
Do not worry. I have spoken on your behalf as well.
I thank you. Perhaps we are then together outsiders?
Truly.
She seems to be faintly amused, but initially she'll be really quite annoyed at the fact that her dress is getting dirty and everything, but after a while she just kind of withdraws into herself a little bit and get a more stoic look. It's not necessarily comfortable, but she will try and have the just the feeling of grime kind of wash off her insofar as she can manage. It's yeah, it's awkward for her, that's definite. So then, how are you all feeling? It's I don't think that this room will come with board, so feeding may perhaps be something for the future. That may become an issue. And she kind of looks concerned, looking at, whether anyone is close to having the beast come to the fore or anything like that.
Is that an offer? Galfred's voice comes from his cell.
From what I understand, it is an offer that one should not make lightly. But if it means saving someone from succumbing to their lowest drags, then I will make that offer. Not easily, though.
I will be fine. Who can I see from my curiosity?
You are in the far corner, immediately to your right. Well, you can see everyone because it's just metal bars, but immediately next to you is Daborah.
Ah. Is there
Okay,
a
so
bench or a bed of any kind in this cell?
There is not. Really, it's just a chamber pot. Yours has been knocked over, which has kind of spilled and poured out into both your and Daborah's chamber.
Galfred will remain standing, doing his best to remain in the cleanest spot he can find.
Out of character, I think I just fixed the storyteller dice finally, so it should now just go to me.
oddly enough, it doesn't seem to have always sent it to the public room, only sometimes.
Now, you wait almost a full hour before this. Well, I'll stop for a second. Is anyone else going to speak up, or was that the end of discussion?
Galfred is falling silent.
I guess Tito would just add that at some point during the conversation, hopefully we will not be kept here long.
Right, so you wait almost a full hour before that door finally opens again, but this time to a much softer face, which I will show now. So all except Galfred would recognize this individual as Chamberlain Genevieve Silvers, currently the acting prince in Adam's hiatus from ruling. Chamberlain Genevieve is described by most as shrewd and efficient. She dresses fairly conservatively and conventionally, and seems to make a point of keeping up appearance without drawing unnecessary attention. She is slightly on the short side, just under 5 feet, but as acting prince this does little to deter her respect. Upon entering the room, she walks almost mechanically to the center, as though by some formula determined by the geometry of the cells, and turns to face the 5 of you. Calmly, she simply states, "Tell me all that has happened at Elysium."
Galfred waits for the others to speak, curious as to what they'll say.
Out of character, I'm sorry, I missed what you said.
Genevieve Silvers walked in, stood in the center of the room, and she asked the 5 of you to tell her all that happened at Elysium.
Out of character, am I correct that the missing player was playing the Ventru?
Yes.
What happened with him? Because we kind of need to have a reason why he's not here with us.
No, he's there. He's in the prison. He's just been quiet.
Okay, because logically, Daborah would actually have, in this situation, deferred to him to take the lead.
Right now, for whatever reason, he's just completely fallen silent. He is not taking the lead whatsoever.
Grey Rat at this question will slowly move, but under his robes it seems almost like he is gliding up to the face of the bars. What is the meaning of us being here if you do not know what happened at Elysium?
Genevieve turns to you in a much more calm and pacified manner than the sheriff or Ford did, as she replies, a number of Knights entered Elysium, and remarkably few have entered. As we have discovered, it was set on fire, and a number of kine have begun killing each other. We are in a state of security which demands the highest level of control. Thus, the utmost precautions have been taken. Now, if you all would like to leave those cells sooner rather than later, I need to know what happened at Elysium.
Of course, milady Silvers. As you know, we had been invited there, or summoned as you wish, by Simon. I believe member of the court that was recognized, if perhaps not equally understood by all. He regaled to us some visions that he had seen. I do not know whether these are the perfect circumstances to explain those visions to you. I certainly can if you wish. During this, outside, we noticed a red glow through the windows, and it seems that we either had been followed or it was a setup, because torch-bearing kine had gathered around the building, which, as you know, was outside of the city walls. In the end, the door was broken down, and there was a resistance among us to try and keep them out, but we could not. Simon offered to shelter those who managed, who could flee through a tunnel which seems to have been located in that building, and hold off the masses that were bent on destroying us. In the end, the tunnel ended up in swampland outside of the city, from where we started making our way back towards the city. When we had arrived inside of the gates, we noticed ahead of us the Hound apprehending Grey Rat, and she gestures to a cell a few paces away from her, who had been separated from us. And this is how we met the sheriff once again, who came upon our group.
You spoke of a vision. What was the vision that Elder Simon had?
He spoke of a plague bearer having arrived in the city, describing signs of the plague that he would be carrying, and some of the effects that it would have on kind and kindred in London. Out of character, I don't recall the vision well enough myself, because it's been a while.
That's fine. If you're not holding anything back, that's sufficient.
She will not in this specific circumstance for sure. It's she probably feels that it will be utterly futile to try.
And so you explain the vision that you were told of, and you see a growing concern on Genevieve's face. And Simon, where are the other Knights? Where did they go? Where did they escape to?
I'm afraid to say that, in my knowledge, we are the ones that escaped. There may have been one or two that were behind us in the tunnel that managed to escape as well. I know a number of those who have fallen, but there are very few unaccounted for, and since I was fairly new to the city, I was not aware of all the names going with the faces. But those I know that have escaped, I can describe to you. There may have been one or two others, but not many. She will actually have a regretful expression on her face. It's more that she is like more regretful because it's a bearer of bad news than that she is grieving. And she will bow her head slightly and say, it is my sad duty to say that Christopher Gacy, among those gathered, has departed as well. I do not know exactly what took him, but there were many with torches and blades that were intent on our destruction.
Once you finish your story, you see now that by this point, Genevieve's mouth is slightly agape, and as if realizing this, she closes her mouth and attempts to flatten her affect once more.
Galfred actually smoothly interjects himself here to support Deborah's story. If I may, what is your name, my lady?
She seems caught unawares when you speak up. I am Chamberlain Genevieve Silvers. We met very briefly when you were brought to the prince, but it was a passing moment. I don't expect you would recall it.
I recall everything I've ever seen perfectly, most of all your face. Galfred smiles. But I never caught your beautiful name. I am, of course, Galfred de Ipswich, apprentice to House and Clan Tremere. I do not expect you to rack your lovely memory for remembering one so insignificant as myself, but I would like to take this opportunity to reinforce and emphasize what my companion, Daborah, has told you. We are loyal subjects of the prince here, and we fought with everything we had against those hateful hypocrites. Galfred bares his fangs slightly, remembering the peasants and their mob with the torches and the sickles. Using his skill at rhetoric, I'd like to try and make a good impression on her and deliver his argument that they are nothing but compliant with procedure.
Okay. Go for a charisma expression, difficulty 7. You see that although when you initially interacted, when you began this conversation, she was very put off by Daborah's story and not extremely engaged. She seems to have a more genuine look as she meets your eyes and hears your words. Thank you for your contribution to my understanding of the situation, Galfred de Ipswich.
I am ever here to serve the Chamberlain. Galfred inclines his bald head in a respectful bow towards her.
She gives a courteous smile. And then she turns to address the rest of you. I will return. She says this almost with the uncertainty that she cannot actually promise she will return. But she knocks on the door, and shortly after it is opened from outside and closes behind her. And you are left alone again.
That was well done, Galfred. Thank you.
Galfred nods.
Not all a success, I'm afraid, as Grey Rat turns back to lean up against the back wall. We are still in cells.
Yes, but I don't claim to know her all that well. But she is of the blood, and the blood will speak to the blood. She will recognize that a certain injustice has been done, and she will see what she can do to ameliorate it.
I'm gonna interject if like a perception awareness from anyone who has auspex. Difficulty 9 minus your auspex. You can also make this roll if you have any other supernatural means of sight or vision, but it will be made at difficulty 9. Perception awareness.
If anyone is looking in Galfred's direction, they suddenly see him pressed tightly up against the bars, and his cool and calm expression has completely collapsed into one of abject fear. His face tight in a rictus expression, looking very pointedly out of the cell. You get the impression that if he was alive, he would be trembling as he grips the bars with his pale hands and presses himself tightly away, his eyes suddenly shut, whispering something in a language that you don't readily recognize.
Daborah's eyes swing over first to Galfred's reaction, and then peers around the room, seemingly honing in on something.
Galfred is whispering to himself, his eyes tightly shut.
Out of character, what language is it that he's speaking?
You should ask that in text chat.
Ah, yes, I am sorry.
No worries. I'm gonna do a couple rolls. Sorry, I'm gonna do a couple rolls here for some people.
Well, noticing this, Tito would ask, "What has you bothered, Galfred?"
Galfred seems to take no notice of you. In fact, his hands have tightened so tightly around the bars, his knuckles have gone completely white, his hands as white as milk. He has stopped whispering, however, and keeps his eyes shut.
Tito is disturbed by this, but otherwise keeps his composure.
After a moment, Galfred seems to have relaxed, at least somewhat, his hands uncurling from the bars, and very slowly turning his head to the left, and almost as if daring to do something terrible, looking over his shoulder in the dark corner of his cell. His fangs bared, he steps away from the bars and turns, looking around his cell.
Do the rest of you fall silent, or is anyone else going to try and strike up a conversation?
Daborah actually will. I guess that since the cells contain of bars solely, it's probably visible. She will be moving her lips and make slight gestures with her fingers, but she will actually make no noise. It will be hard to figure out what it is she's actually saying without really looking straight at her face.
Well, Tito would attempt to gain eye contact with Galfred, and he would speak the words, "You should calm yourself."
Galfred seems perfectly unaware of anyone speaking to him, until after a moment he turns and, blinking his eyes in a very human way, he regards the others in the cells. Realizing that he has drawn quite a bit of attention to himself, he shakes his head. I'm fine. Do not concern yourself. Although you have never seen anyone who looked less fine in their life.
What is it you have noticed?
Nothing. Nothing. We only must wait for the Chamberlain. She will be along shortly. He says this, looking very distracted, not even looking at you.
Alright. No one else wants to speak up. You are left there for a full night. Genevieve does not return in that evening, and dawn eventually forces you all into uncomfortable and cramped sleep. And I think we're going to take a little break since we're almost at the 2 hour, and I don't want to get us into the next scene without more time. Soon after waking, after dawn does force you into these uncomfortable and cramped sleeping quarters, and you awaken in the next evening in these same tiny cells. The metal door in the room opens once more, and Genevieve returns, but this time with 2 guests in tow. The first guest is someone that Galfred would recognize. Regent Jean Garrett. tall man in a long black robe draping over his legs walks in, his black hood down, revealing his face. Apparently late 40s, pale, but with an intense face, like a strict instructor with a perpetual glare. He stares at you all with his small, dark brown eyes as he enters, his gaze stopping at Gelfrid and staying there a moment longer.
Galfred has risen to his feet out of the muck. He actually slept the day with his back against the cell bars, facing the dark corner of his cell, huddled up against the corner like that. Seems to have kept himself mostly out of the shit, though he does not smell his best. Despite his squalid conditions, the moment Galfred lays eyes upon the Regent, he bows his head low, intoning, "Master," softly.
He does not reply, but he does give you the faintest of nods. And in times past, you know that he would not have given much more, but this evening he seems particularly restrained in his ability to communicate. And yes, as this is a new night, if you haven't already, reduce yourself by 1 blood point. The second guest in tow behind Genevieve is a resplendent woman of great elegance and beauty, apparently in her late 30s or early 40s. That is fairly well-known character. Lady Eleanor Grey steps in to the side of Jean Garrett. She has a flowing dark red and black dress with a gemmed pendant around her neck and wears long black silk gloves. Her sunrise red hair is done up in the modern royal fashion. Her skin is pale, but it maintains a healthy light pink to it, and a crimson cloth ribbon wraps around her lower abdomen, circling the corset that further tightens the curves of her figure. She would have an impressive bust, but for her modesty, she maintains a draped neckline that does not reveal too much. The three of them step in, and then stand briefly as the door closes behind them. And as they enter, not hearing anything from anyone, Genevieve leads the way and walks back to the center of the room, looking you all over. She returns to you, Daborah, as though to converse.
Daborah will stand up from her squalor, clearly looking apologetic, and make a curtsy. Milady Grey.
She offers you a quick, weak smile, though clearly she has a concerned look on her face, and it fades quite fast. Genevieve stares at you a moment, and you hear her repeat the same demands as she did the previous night, in much the same way, asking you to tell her what happened at Elysium. But this time, when you hear this word, tell, as she demands you tell her honestly what happened, you feel her gaze is sharp and fixed this time. It is not as pleasant and calm as it was yesterday. There's a magnetic pull from her penetrating words that compel you to speak, unless you attempt to resist her.
I'm gonna whisper your rules question.
Okay. Sorry guys, just clarifying something. Okay. So you can explain. Does she resist? Does she explain
No.
everything?
Daborah will not resist. She will very clearly feel the impact of the well, not talking game terms here, but of the presence of the two elder kindred.
Mhm.
She clearly she feels the call of the blood and the power that comes with it, but she will allow it to, how do I say this, to bore into her, and still use her own voice to explain what she had explained the night before, trying to sound modest but firm, graceful in her speech, and she will not. She will make an effort not to make her own role. That is the role of the group of us sound more magnanimous, more impactful than it really was. She will explain that we did what we could, and we took Simon's offer when it seems all else was lost.
All right. So the rest of you see this. You see that there is a change in demeanor in Genevieve tonight. She's being a lot more forceful than the soft, short, petite woman who came in last night. And she is clearly making use of the gifts of the blood to pull information from Daborah. And that the two guests she has behind her are simply staring at Daborah, looking into her eyes, watching her movement. They seem passive. They do not say anything. They simply watch. And eventually, Genevieve releases the tension in her gaze. You can feel this, and she takes a step back to the other two, but only so that she can walk to the next cell where Tito is. Come forward.
Tito will stand and come towards the front of the prison door.
As you come closer, you now too also feel the power behind her eyes, and you feel words gravitating out of your throat of their own accord as she demands you tell me if this is accurate. You don't have to repeat the entire story, but is Tito going to resist any of this?
You're asking just to resist the influence or resist speaking?
She's basically compelling you to speak, and it's something of a contest of wills. She is imposing her will upon you to tell the honest truth if what Daborah said is accurate. Are you resisting her demands? As you feel these words start to come out of your mouth, do you try and pull them back in? Do you try and not let this happen?
No, Tito will not resist.
Okay. Apparently satisfied with the testimony you eventually give, she again steps back, and true to her algorithmic and calculated reputation, she repeats this with the last three of you. When she gets to Grey Rat, she demands he remove his mask. However, how does Grey Rat respond to this?
Grey Rat does not respond. He simply stands there for what seems a long time, but then he'll slowly withdraw his mangled and deformed hand as it reaches up over his mask. And as it pulls it away, he feels almost a little ashamed, so he'll bring his hood up and over just a little bit, maybe making it harder for the others around to see, aside from Mrs. Silver, who's standing directly in front of him.
And again, Garrett and Eleanor stand behind her, watching her every movement as she too demands honesty. Are you or is Galfred going to try and resist this as she makes her way down the line?
Galfred is... Normally he would comply, but he does have a certain amount of indignation at having his mind played with, at least by someone other than a member of Clan and House Tremere. Although he's going to try and gauge this force assaulting him if he has any hope of standing up against it. If not, he's not going to resist.
Make a... let's see. Let's look at this character sheet. So not to resist, but simply to determine and assess the will being imposed upon you, make a willpower roll. Difficulty 5. It's not terribly difficult for you to test your will briefly before you decide to fight. You immediately recognize the power behind such a small woman commands titanic will. This would not be an easy feat to accomplish, to deny her the truth as she reaches you.
Galfred is a bit indignant, but he submits to the questioning. He does not want to waste his energy hiding the truth when there is no reason to.
And although Jean Garrett is staring at you as you give this truth, you can see in his face a similar kind of indignation and unhappiness with the circumstances as they are, but he seems resigned towards it being inevitable. You get this impression simply by looking at him. But apparently satisfied, she returns to address all of you from again that pinpoint in the room with the last of you questioned. She addresses you again. I will return tomorrow evening. And she turns to leave, but throughout this, each of you have noticed in Eleanor a growing look of apoplectic rage. She has been quiet, but her eyes are wide with fury, and small tears of blood are starting to form in the corner of her eyes just before she can turn away to follow.
Before they leave, that was the Chamberlain saying she would return tomorrow night?
Yes.
Unable to bear the thought of another night in this cell, there's a certain desperation that is uncharacteristic of Galfred, a desperation to get out of the cell. As he suddenly speaks up, Chamberlain.
The three of them stop, and they all turn to look at you.
In that moment, Galfred is going to use his genius to try and assemble an argument as to why they should be released, a legal argument of some kind, citing the traditions and perhaps working in a bit of the politics of the clans in there if he can, from what little understanding he has of it.
Okay. You can try a... go with intelligence, law, difficulty 6. It's actually not terribly difficult to realize the arrangement here. You don't have to re-roll that 10. You know from your thorough study and knowledge of politics and law, particularly among Cainites, that this is the Tower of London. It is the direct domain of the prince, and he can effectively hold you here as long as he wants without any reason, because the city is his greater domain and you are on his personal domain.
Of course, he can hold us without reason, but Galfred wonders if there's any way he can appeal to the Chamberlain to release them into the custody of their clans, under the promise that they appear for whatever the prince requires.
Let me think for a moment.
If he's able to make this argument, anyway.
That's what I'm considering. You have enough successes on top of the knowledge I already said that the accommodations you're asking for, or would have asked for, are not. They would not be consistent with the amount of security that you have seen and that Genevieve has explained are being imposed right now. A high level of security and lockdown has been enacted that you would be familiar with, are only used in extreme circumstances, and they allow for extreme control over incarceration. You would not be given permission even if they believed you would return to court.
So essentially there's no loophole out of here.
Not that you're aware of, and you're very aware of this subject.
Galfred will not stop there. He will resort at least realizing he can do nothing for his companions, he will resort to his to get himself out of the cell, as his own freedom seems to be very important to him, and it's curious why he wants to get out of that cell, as he seems to be making a very ardent argument. Chamberlain, you know well the oaths that... Perhaps you don't. The Tremere, my house and clan, we abide by laws and traditions, as well as any Cainite in this city. And perhaps if you would but release me into the custody of my master, I could return to the chantry here in the city and await your audience at the prince's leisure. Perhaps I must feed and commune with certain projects that have been neglected with my time spent here. These conditions are not conducive to a man of my learning. I beg you, please, please, let me out. Let me return to the chantry and be under the eye of my master. I give my word not to leave the sight of my sire, who is but standing a few feet from you.
Your sire looks at you with a raised eyebrow. He seems to have a look of suspicion at your desperate plea. But you can try. You can make a charisma, empathy, difficulty 9. It's going to be extremely difficult.
Oh no.
At this point, Genevieve doesn't have a chance to speak up because your sire speaks up for her, or rather for you. As he turns away from you, his eyes growing wide with anger now, and he turns to Genevieve. He is simply not used to being in such conditions. He will be fine this evening.
Galfred shrinks away from the bars, looking absolutely miserable.
Genevieve does not say anything more, and Jean knocks on the door. It is eventually opened, and the three of them depart.
Curiously, he actually turns away from the bars, looking outward, so that his back is to most everyone else, that he is facing the dark corner of his cell. Almost as if he were on guard.
From behind you, you'll hear Daborah's soft voice. It was a fair try. We'll be here if whatever it was that came for you will be here again. Find peace in the fact that you will not be alone in this ordeal. There's no shame in fear, just in surrender.
Galfred almost seems unaware of you, Daborah, before snapping a glance sidelong. What? I don't know what you're talking about. Get away from me. He bares his fangs slightly as he turns away from you and slumps down onto the ground, hugging his knees to his chest, staring at the corner of his cell.
I will be here when you return. And she, tries and kind of lean into a corner of her cell as best as she can.
How is Tito reacting to this? Hearing Galfred's outcry at the situation, the conditions that you've been left in, mostly without good cause. What's he doing?
Tito is very interested in what apparently a visitor came for him from listening in on the conversation. He has nothing, no clues to go on, but it does keep him thinking, at least preoccupying his mind from his poor condition in this filthy cell. Is keeping him from being too upset.
And does Grey Rat add anything to this?
Grey Rat seems very stoic in his as he continues to stand in the corner in the back of his cell. He continues to examine his companions and also the room in the cells that they are contained in. Are there any windows or bell towers or any entrances into this room in particular at all?
There are no windows whatsoever. There is one entrance and exit, and it is the door you came in through.
Okay.
Similarly, John Talbot has been extremely quiet during all of this. He's been extremely... he's coalesced to everything demanded of him and has not been engaging very much in his own mind. But the night passes into day, and the rising sun again presses you into sleep through the walls that conceal you from it. And again, you are in this cell on this third night of hell that you have been through, all of you, as you lose another blood point, as you rise just in time for the door to open abruptly again. And walking with the purpose and briskness that you've become familiar with comes Sheriff Timbers once again.
Hearing someone enter the room, Galfred practically leaps to his feet. The beast is prominent in his mind. His hunger is constant and sharp, almost painful now. It's been some time since he's fed.
Daborah will give a piercing glance in his direction, and with a soft but fairly insistent voice say, "You do know that I gave that offer."
Galfred pointedly tries to ignore her.
Tito greets the sheriff.
Have someone make a roll really quick. Alright, sorry, taking care of a roll. So the sheriff enters. Oh, that's an unfortunate roll.
Yes, it is.
Anyway, Tito greets the sheriff and says, "Sheriff Jack, I trust you have good news for us?"
He does not enter alone, as you see a number of knights have come in with him. 4 of these white surcoat knights you met before follow him in. And they're standing by idly as he reaches into his jacket somewhere, and he retrieves an iron ring of keys and quickly starts moving about, unlocking each of your cells. Sorry, I got a couple private messages. So he begins opening your cells as he begins to speak up. Prince Adam will be holding court tonight to give his sentencing and determining your fate. I am to escort you there now. From here until the end of his declaration, you are not to leave my sight. You are not to utter a word to each other, myself, or anyone else. If I begin to suspect you are so much as flinching at the wrong time during this transport, I have the full authority to personally delve out my own sentencing immediately. Is that understood?
At this, Grey Rat is going to quickly rush to the bars of his cell. Sentencing. For what?
It's for me to decide, it's for the prince to decide.
Not a word at all.
Daborah will step out of her cell, almost shivering. She'll have normally she has a fairly healthy, almost glow to her skin, but at the moment she will look pale. Bloodshot eyes, and you notice that there's actually some scratch marks in her arm, some tears in her dress, things like that. And she will nod quietly, with a rapid, nervous motion at the sheriff.
Galfred is uncharacteristically on edge. He looks he looks around the room, his eyes darting as he steps out of his cell, his fingers loose and ready as he takes in his surroundings. The sheriff is here, of course. Is he accompanied by anyone?
Just the 4 white surcoat knights, 4 of the 10 you saw earlier.
Sharpening his hearing, is the door still open leading into the cell block?
It is.
Can he hear any other activity outside the door?
Just the... Nope, actually no. There's nothing else past that.
Are the knights or the sheriff visibly armed?
They are. They are visibly armed.
With weapons? Stakes?
Yes, same stakes, and Sheriff Timbers still has his claymore.
He seems to be taking all this information in, and I'm Galfred is going to look to the others to see if they're compliant or try to determine if they intend to go along quietly or if there is going to be violence.
Tito shows no signs of aggression.
Does Daborah make any more moves or say anything else? Or does she comply to step out and
Oh,
be
she will
escorted?
comply. She seems to be slowly recovering her composure, but it takes an effort for her. It's very clear that she has been impacted pretty hard by the circumstances, and she's just kind of going through the motion at the moment. Acting automatically with, minimal levels of decorum and etiquette, but her usual grace is just not there.
Assuming no one resists and that Grey Rat eventually falls silent and falls in line, you are led out of the prison block there, back into the hall you came from 2 nights previous.
Galfred follows after, his eyes always sharp, looking around.
Yeah, Grey Rat will comply. However, he is sizing up the knights and the sheriff as they move. He seems a little on edge.
Is there any way to tell if the knights are mortal?
Make a perception awareness, difficulty 7. It's a little hard to tell through all the metal armor. They are mortal. Though you suspect, you're a smart vampire and you're not new, you suspect they have the strength of ghouls. And it's unclear how old they are. But the 5 of you are led back through the dim, narrow stone hallway you came from, and you come back to that fork where you originally turned left rather than right. Except this time, the many distant moans and groans of pain and tortured souls somewhere down the right are completely absent. There is no noise coming from that direction anymore. You are led out of this building and back around the curtain wall. You are led past a third portcullis separating the innermost layer and the central white tower. The portcullis raises as you approach and enter the innermost layer. You see now, as you are outside for the first time in several nights, dark rain clouds have begun to form above, as it is still early in the evening, and there is still light enough to see the difference. These dark rain clouds start to form, and the distant crackle of thunder bellows above you as you approach the white tower in all of its austere glory. Four simple walls make up the nearly 100-foot keep. It is a very simple building structurally. It has 4 turret towers on each corner, but you can see that there are many men on alert at the top, and even looking down through a few of the murder holes in the turrets. The stone is more beige than white, despite the name. It's darkened clearly from erosion, enduring the test of time for 3 centuries. And the entrance to this keep is very quaint. It is not grandiose, as one might expect for the prince's personal domain and court. It is simple wooden scaffolding supports basic staircase leading up to an elevated door entrance, which is itself not grandiose or decorated or even double-doored, but it is raised. And if that staircase was removed, it would be very difficult for regular people to even enter the keep. Now I'm going to change. Music. Once led inside, you see the high ceiling and the two mirrored rows of wooden columns creating a natural pathway through this first level, leading to an ornate black wooden throne on an elevated dais. To your right is a different chamber connected to this larger open space. It is a chapel with semicircle columns raising the full height of the keep. But you are led away from the chapel and farther down this pathway towards the throne, towards the dais. And as you walk, high up above you are small stone balconies and guardrails where a large number of individuals have begun to cluster and watch down below. Any of you looking longer than a glance at these people would recognize their features. They are the Cainites of London, almost all in number from what you can tell, all here as spectators for something. Some are grouped together, leaning over the rails like children watching a play, others in private booths and balconies, looking from the shadowy corners and behind walls to see what will happen. The faintest of whispers pass between their lips to each other. You can read the suspicion, the shock, and the amazement, even the incredulity on their faces, even from the first floor. The sheriff guides you forward toward this empty throne until you are just 20 feet or so in front of it. It is empty right now. And you are briefly reminded of Simon as you are placed like chess pieces to where the sheriff deems appropriate before he backs away behind you. Though not far, he and a number of the white surcoat knights have formed a line preventing any leaving in that direction. I assume all of you have been complying not to speak, but how is everyone taking this in?
Galfred stands there looking dirty and ashen-faced, the look of a kindred that is, or Cainite rather, that is not fed in many nights. His head down and eyes cast towards the floor. His bony, slightly bony hands clasped in front of him, seeming just to looking the image of someone who's accepted their fate.
Approaching this gathering of the kindred of London, with each pair of faces that she sees left and right of her, a small change seems to come over Daborah, and although she is clad by now in rags and dirt, with each step she seems to regain a little bit of pride, and it is very obvious she is well aware of her disheveled state, and she'll still have the bloodshot look in her eyes and the greyish tint to her skin, but each step she seems to throw off some of the misery, and she will gain a bit more spring in her step, and she will try and ignore the disheveled state and undecorous appearance that she has, and show some of the pride of her blood and present herself just with her presence of mind and her personality as best as she can, walking between them, approaching the throne.
All right. How is Grey Rat doing as he is escorted up to just in front of the dais and in front of this black throne.
Grey Rat is seemingly very composed in this moment. He is walking slowly, but he is walking upright, and as if his posture was impeccable. He moves slowly into position, and he does not regard any of the other Cainites watching or any of his companions standing next to him. He simply stares forward coldly, as if unaware of anything going on around him.
Tito is doing his best to maintain composure and keep a stony expression. However, his jaw is clenched tightly and his eyes are seething at the moment.
Let me respond to a PM. Alright, sorry, taking care of a roll. Alright, it does, in fact, take a long time while you stand there waiting idly. But at long last, from behind the throne in the corner of the room, where a spiral staircase begins, the sounds of movement can be heard, the sounds of steps on stairs, tile stairs, a number of them. Eventually walking down and out of the spiral staircase towards you is a man clad in black armor and a cloak, with chain visible at his forearms and legs. A white cross is on his black tunic, and the black kite shield he carries in. He has a sheathed bastard sword at his side, and a cylindrical black great helm covering his face. He looks similar to the knights behind you. 3 other men almost identical to this man also step forward from the staircase, and they form rank around the throne. Look at a roll. Finally, one last figure enters the throne room, and at one point or another, every single one of you would have at least seen him, if not heard him speak. Is a man in a long black robe with a gold pendant. His hair has almost completely receded. He is not an attractive man by any means. He looks quite inhuman. His sunken eyes make him look as though the sickly yellow skin stretched across his skull is only as thick as a hair. It's evident just by looking that whatever humanity this thing once had is long gone. And as he enters the room, an eerie and unholy air fills the chamber you stand in. The whispers you were hearing above retreat, and a hush falls over the crowds. He has an alert and vexed gaze, and the discomfort of his sinister presence falls squarely upon each of you individually in turn. before he finally takes his seat in this ornate black throne. But even just to stand before him at this distance fills you all with dread. A number of you, any of you really happening to, even for a moment, separate your glance from Prince Adam towards Daborah would notice that she is actually composing herself extremely well. Despite the grime on her, she seems to almost glow with this calming presence of perfect presentation, almost in spite of everything that she's been through and all that covers her. She has a very very clean and well presented appearance. Does anyone react in any particular way as Prince Adam finally steps in and sits down?
Galfred keeps his eyes on the floor until the prince finally sits and raises his eyes to not quite meet the prince's face. He's actually looking from this vantage point at the prince's the hem of his cloak, knowing well the consequences for meeting the gaze of an elder vampire.
Daborah will give the impression that she is awaiting the prince's pleasure. Calm, standing there with a surprising amount of confidence, as if in the face of all this eldritch might, unholy might if you wish, she has found a salvation that is hard to comprehend, and she is just standing there calmly radiating, seemingly unaffected by all the gazes on her. She is. She doesn't give the impression that she is pleased or even feeling pleasant in the circumstances, but she is almost at perfect ease.
The rest of you maintain silence.
Yes, Grey Rat will continue to stand and maintain his upright posture while he waits for the prince to speak.
And yes, Tito is doing the same.
Alright. Coming up from behind you actually is Genevieve from the shadows. She passes all of you to stand fearlessly at this elder's side, and faces you at his side. Adam waits an uncomfortable amount of time, simply staring at you all with his chin resting in his right hand, having long ago either discarded or forgotten normal social etiquette. His gaze lingers the longest on Galfred, but in turn it passes along each of you, and when he looks finally at Daborah, it seems as though he is about to wince, but it changes. His eyebrows even raise slightly at Daborah's presentation. You think perhaps a very small smile starts to appear. And as though satisfied by the discomfort he is placing you all under, he at last speaks in an unnaturally hollow and removed voice. "13 Cainites went into Elysium 2 nights prior. At some time after midnight, there were reports of a large group of kine appearing, and Elysium caught fire. The ghouls we sent to investigate found the kind in complete chaos and pandemonium, tearing each other apart. Impossible even to read despite our more draconic methods. They proved useless in their information. Sometime after that, the 5 of you were found north of the city in the fen, the only apparent survivors. At this, you hear an anxious murmuring above in the crowds in the balconies and ledges, hearing this news. Adam pauses and lazily holds a finger up from where his hand rests without actually looking up at the crowds. But this is enough to quell the court back into silence. He goes on now, speaking more to the crowds than the 5 of you. These 5 were brought in for interrogation. Our most potent elders, with the gift of keen sight, observed the survivors as they were compelled to explain their story. The conclave was attacked. It is believed to have been organized and planned by another Cainite. The goal or target of the assault is not clear at this time. From what we have gathered, the fire and the slaughter of the kine was the doing of none other than the Malkavian elder Simon, who is believed to have died in the same fire. His look returns to the 5 of you. Given the testimony provided, the evidence at hand, and the truth gleamed from Elders Grey and Garrett, I absolve thee of the crime of breaking the tradition of destruction, and I absolve thee of the breaking of silence of the blood.
Galfred looks visibly relieved.
Daborah will make a curtsy.
There is more murmuring above you at this declaration. How is Tito and Grey Rat responding?
A smirk forms on Tito's face.
There is a slight easing of Grey Rat's posture as he hears the news, but he continues to stare forward.
However, given that the 5 of you are the only Cainites whom I believe cannot be potential instigators in this situation, you are hereby commissioned as hounds to Sheriff Timbers for the purpose specifically of investigating this most egregious attack and finding the true culprit or culprits. This investigation is to be overseen by Chamberlain Silvers, but you lot are to report directly to Sheriff Timbers. Do this, and you shall have my thanks, neonates. There's a louder murmuring and muttering beginning to erupt above you.
Galfred is searching the crowd to see if he can find his sire.
You do not see his face among those visible.
His eyes return to the prince's cloak.
Daborah will make a small step forward and bend one knee, and with a bent head say, "I am at the sheriff's disposal as per your request." And then she will take the step backwards and stand straight up again.
The prince gives the weakest of laughs as he looks at you. He does not chide you, he seems entertained. Upon this, the prince props himself up with his hands upon the armrests and rises out of his seat. He gives you all one last stern look before turning to leave, his cape catching the air and billowing behind him as he is followed by his guard.
And as he turns and his cape billows out behind him, Galfred is going to, just with the slightest twist of his fingers, of his index and his middle finger, just a very slight 360, a little tiny dime-shaped circle in the air behind his back, and whisper in the most silent of whispers he can manage, "In potestate mea," and conjure the power of his blood. To seize control of the prince's cloak as it billows behind him and flip the cloak over on top of his head as he tries to walk away. And stand there to look innocent.
Okay. You pull it off. You see that the cloak, as it billows, as he turns and his guard is already marching alongside him, his cloak floats up, and
with the billowing, he's trying to make it look as natural as possible.
It pulls off very well. It seems to billow too much and goes over his head. And he stops for a moment to fix it. But you realize that at this, a lot of the activity above you has stopped. No one is laughing and no one is talking anymore. It's definitely been noticed, and Prince Adam has stopped to fix, his guards stopping in line with him. And he turns slowly to look up at the crowds above. His face is, eerily enough, unchanged in affect. There's no apparent anger, but you get the sincere impression that there is a great deal of rage behind this skull that pokes out from this man, and his gaze eventually lowers down to the five of you.
Galfred is staring at the floor, silent, and his hands clasped in front of him. He looks as though he didn't even notice what happened.
Alright, now I need to make a roll for Prince Adam. You see, Adam, he looks to the crowd, and he looks back down, and he returns his gaze to the crowd. And you think he looks at someone in particular, and you do see the beginning of a scowl on his face as he finally turns back to leave, returning to the spiral staircase. What's Tito doing at this point?
Tito is out of character, wondering, did he notice who actually casted that?
Does Tito know?
Yeah, was it just so subtle that none of us standing next to Galfred noticed, or?
Make perception alertness difficulty 9. That was an extremely subtle move, and it didn't require much from Galfred. And without actively already looking at him, it would be extremely difficult to have just noticed it by chance. Or without knowing it was coming. In the meantime, what's Grey Rat doing as he sees this happen to the prince? And he's been dismissed, more or less.
As the prince is walking away, he relaxes his posture, and then as his cape flips over, he stands extremely still, almost a little afraid of what the prince will do. He wasn't sure if that was caused by something or if it was just a stiff breeze that came in. But he dares not move or relish in any sort of reaction to it.
Yes, Tito relaxes after that display and the prince leaves.
And Daborah?
For a moment, she has the suspicion that she could find out by looking people in their eyes and just giving that moment of a soul search, but it's that moment of curiosity slips off her, and she stands there just being very aware of the court around her, and being for once calm in her surroundings and at peace with how things have unfolded. She declines to be curious, essentially.
Alright. Genevieve does not follow him. She remains where she was, but then begins to approach the group of you. Her eyes raised quite a bit as she saw this, and she turned her gaze away as he turned, hoping to pretend having never seen it clearly. But you can see the extreme concern on her face even after he leaves. She seems to be standing still but looking to the left as though listening for him to fully leave before she even dares move. But at last she does to approach you, down from the dais. And again, her short stature ends up putting her a head below most of you. You are most fortunate, neonates. you were spared any of our more draconic interrogation methods, and Prince Adam showed you much grace tonight. You do have Marco Vespucci to thank for the former. He convinced me it would be cleaner to recruit the help of Regent Jean Garrett and Lady Eleanor Grey, rather than push you to the rack or Judas Cradle. She fails to hide an insidious grin creeping at the corner of her pink lips.
Surely such instruments are meant for enemies of the prince and not his loyal subjects. Galfred speaks up softly, looking ever the smudged prisoner.
I suspect that it is up to us to prove which one we are, and I plan to do so.
Adam seems to believe that you have acquitted yourselves from testimony. I do not believe further proof is required at this time. But speak of the devil, Marco Vespucci arrives now. And she looks past you all, back to where the line of knights and Sheriff Timbers were. And back from you steps a bulbous, waddling man with a noble's hat in one arm. That is this man. Marco Vespucci is known as something of an ancilla, an older ancilla, but an ancilla nonetheless. He commands a fair amount of respect among the London Cainites. More than you, but less than Genevieve. Somewhere in the middle. Though he is an unfortunate-looking man, the embrace did very little to improve his appeal. But he does a deep bow as he comes closer. Congratulations on your acquittal, young ones. I hope your stay in Tower was brief and painless. And he looks over to Genevieve, as if for verification that it was painless, and she nods quietly, if not somewhat disappointed. I do so abhor some of the techniques which must at times be employed to gain the truth that escapes the gifts of the blood. I am glad to see it was avoidable this time.
More's the concern for my thirst, my lord. Galfred speaks up, clearly having the look of someone who has not fed in several nights.
Oh yes, excellent timing. My young Cainite, I have a small gift for you all, as I am certain this entire ordeal must have been quite enervating. Some of my special stock, a rare vintage of blood from far away. It is awaiting you in the chapel. He gestures briefly behind him, towards where you came in, and the chapel was off to the side. I am certain it will entice even the most refined of palates.
Galfred is not so crass as to immediately turn and run off to the refreshments. Instead, he regards the Chamberlain to see if they have been truly dismissed or if she has anything left to say.
Almost on cue, the Chamberlain speaks up. I must attend to a meeting of the primogeniture elders of the city. I believe the sheriff means to speak with you here as well regarding your duties. He should be returning shortly.
Daborah will actually look Elder Vespucci over carefully, as if she's trying to estimate whether that last phrase, the most refined palette was addressed to her, or just a generic phrase?
You get the impression it was aimed mostly at John, who has continued to be very quiet,
Mm-hmm.
more so than anyone else in particular.
I mean, I got to assume that him being a Ventru, he's rather used to people with particular taste in blood.
Yeah, you get that impression. How is Tito and Grey Rat responding to the gifts and actually the revelation that this man spared you from some of the worst conditions you could have been exposed to in the Tower of London?
Tito graciously thanks Marco Vespucci for all that he's done.
He gives a bow.
Standing straight at attention, Grey Rat is going to immediately start walking to where the very large, pudgy man had indicated, given that the Chamberlain has addressed that she is needed elsewhere, and he is quite done with this situation. He's very excited to get out of the tension of this room.
Marco Vespucci does not seem to make an outward reaction to what some might consider an insult, having just been walked by, passed over. Instead, he simply addresses the remaining four of you. I must beg my leave now, as well. Good evening, young Canaanites.
Thank you, Master Vespucci. Your grace is appreciated.
He gives another bow at his large waist, and then he begins to waddle away.
Galfred watches him go with sullen, sunken eyes, his bald head smudged from his time in the cell, glancing sidelong at Daborah and Tito before turning and sweeping away towards the refreshments to try and quiet some of that burning thirst in the back of his throat.
Daborah will follow, but there is a clear hesitance to her behavior. The mention of the blood, and she can probably smell it from where she is at. It awakens that hunger, especially after this time. But there is a strong reticence in her. She is also almost walking, not quite like a marionette, but she's struggling with herself.
I will note that you cannot smell any blood yet. Hungry or not, there is no blood to smell, oddly enough.
Okay.
But at this, John speaks up briefly, finally breaking his silence. As I said, I must meet with my sire immediately. Excuse me. And he begins to leave.
Very well, John.
I suspect that we all will be moving into the chapel.
It sounds like that is the case. So is anyone not going to the chapel? Alright. So, Grey Rat leading the rest of you again, separating from the group and trailblazing to the destination. He makes his way first to the chapel, and he is first to make the discovery that at the chapel, 5 young women in simple white gowns stand with their heads bowed down, All of them have skin so dark brown it is almost black, and an odd-looking, short, bald man stands at attention in simple servant's attire. I am Master Vespucci's attendant, Seymour. I'm here to make sure that you receive these gifts. Do not worry about the mess, my lords and lady. I will handle that. They will not be missed.
A generous offer.
Much as Daborah was a perfect example of grace and decorum in the court, she, as soon as she is presented with a scene, she seems utterly crestfallen. She steps over into the chapel, takes in her surroundings for a quick moment, and she just about catches herself from stumbling and crying out. She's very much looking for some way to behave. She's lost for words and what to do for a moment.
Gelfred, on the other hand, needs no further prodding. The moment he sees one of these vessels presenting themselves, though he is more used to feeding from decanters and urns of earth, he immediately moves forward to slake his thirst upon the nearest one, grasping her by the back of her neck and dipping his shaven head towards her throat. In the moment his fangs slice into her skin and he tastes that rich, sweet blood, he begins feeding fitfully upon her, too angry and hungry to think about anything else other than filling himself up and being at peace with this raging hunger inside him.
You hear a squeal of joy briefly from this woman as you drive these fangs into her, and she remains there captivated by the kiss. The other four simply stand waiting, as though they did not even see you approach.
Grey Rat is gonna move back and forth, staring at the women as he does so, as if examining them all, trying to decide which one to pick. And as he stops in front of one, he looks towards the man that had seemingly brought them. Do you have a knife?
You're asking the attendant?
Yes.
Oh, well, yes, actually I do. I have a knife. And he fuddles with himself, his hands, until he retrieves a simple knife from somewhere in his jacket and hands it to you, handle out.
Grey Rat reaches out to grasp the handle of the knife. His long, crooked, broken-looking fingers wrapping themselves around the handle as he pulls it back. He begins to rake part of his thumb over the edge, using the edge to maybe cut at his fingernail a little bit as he examines it. Pity. Much sharper than I would prefer. Come, my darling. As he reaches out with his free hand to wrap his fingers around her neck, we will make do. And then he begins to lead her off to the corner of the room.
Daborah will approach the manservant, and she seems to have regained some of her composure, but she's still she's missing some of her usual easy manners, and she will say, I am sorry, I must have missed your name. You mentioned that these would not be missed. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
People of my blood have certain traditions. Would it be possible to take the vessel of my choice to my domain? I can give you the address. It is here in the city, not far away.
Yes, well, there is the problem that these women must remain within this tower. What you do with them must be completed within the White Tower is what my instructions were. They may not leave.
I understand this. Can I have a word with you for a moment?
Yes, of course.
Out of character, I'll type. Give me a sec.
Meanwhile, Galfred's pale grip, his cold hands have tightened around the girl's dusky throat as he pulls her body, cleaving her to him as he continues to feed, his jaw working as a single red-crimson line streaks past where his mouth meets her soft skin. Galfred has lost himself in the ecstasy of feeding as his eyes are closed and a low, guttural, juicy groan rolls from his throat in pleasure at finally being full again.
And as you do so, you see that the color completely fades from this woman, and she was a very dark complexion, though now she is quite hollow and pale. Her corpse is almost desiccated, and it is what it is. You drain her to the point of complete death, and there is not a drop left in her. And you realize as you pull back that you've drained every drop of life from this woman.
When Galfred realizes he is sucking upon a dry, dead artery, he releases his fangs from her throat, his mouth wet with her hot blood as he looks at her and sees that there is no capillary refill in any part of her body, and her plump flesh has been sunken in slightly from the force of his sucking as he looks dazed, almost as if realizing what he had done. "Is she dead?" he murmurs as he wipes his mouth with the back of his hand, staring at what he had done.
Make a conscience roll. Difficulty 8. To your shock and growing anxiety, you realize that this woman had a family at some point, that she had been brought here like cattle, and that you fed upon her like meat. And this thought pierces you as you come back, but then you realize that it's simply a way of canine existence, and that it really is not as great a big deal as perhaps you feared.
Galfred has very little direct experience with killing, at least in terms of hunting. And as he studies her corpse with the intent of one who might, perhaps a doctor or even a scholar, he pushes on her fingers, testing to see how very dry and frail she is now, her corpse drained completely as Galfred licks the residue of her essence from his fangs and turns away from her, disinterested now. Is very detached and cold again as he crosses the room, and he does not leave, but he awaits the others and what is to come next.
Well, Tito will go towards one of the girls and look for the most darkest, shadowy corner in the tower and command the girl to follow.
You're taking one of these girls to a corner of the keep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. She follows. She is a listless body, an automaton in your grasp.
And once the spot has been reached, Tito will slightly turn her head to expose her neck and sink his fangs in.
And she too lets out a cry of joy as she feels you bite down upon her. How far will Tito be feeding tonight? Or you can PM it to me.
Damning.
As you pull back, she collapses in your arms if you do indeed even hold her up at all. And you feel quite a bit more sated in your experience, which is not great, but enough to judge the life of a mortal. You expect she likely will not survive from this much blood loss.
After having talked with the servant for a while, Daborah will approach the remaining girls, and I think, out of character, I think there's only 2 left at the moment.
Yes.
She will exchange a few words with both, and listening to the replies if there's any. We'll choose one, and then take her towards an area where probably in prior times an altar used to be, and sit the both of them down on the steps, and kneel down with her and try and lead this girl in prayer. And after that, she will whisper to the girl and take the arm and drink softly, taking time to whisper from time to time in between sips. And she will do her best to compose herself. It seems that she's taking great pains to perhaps not so much explain the experience, but to share an aspect of it with the girl she is feeding from. She's definitely very intent on the reply from the girl, looking for expressions other than, loud outcries or other such emotional things. Although those things are important, she will do her best to look for opinions other than purely guttural reactions.
Opinions by this woman?
Correct.
She is, if she even could speak French or English, or rather Old English, you're not sure, but she seems lost in the throes of ecstasy once you bite down, and seems primarily focused on the pleasure of the kiss. She's not really engaging in discourse right now.
Okay. And to a great extent, how much feeding Daborah will do, it will depend on the reaction from the girl, actually. If at any point she notices that the pleasure seems to give way for pain, then she will hold back. Rules-wise, I am actually not sure whether one of the kindred is aware of how much blood they are below their normal capacity, and as such can kind of stop at that point.
Let me look at you. You are definitely hungry, but you are not going to lose control if you feed. And you're not a fledgling. You have enough experience to know how much to feed without endangering someone.
Okay.
Which in this case would be about 3 blood points, or a little bit less than a third. It would definitely knock her out. She would be fully unconscious, but she would very likely recover.
And that will save her. Or well enough.
Alright, then you gain 3 blood points, and she, so far as you can tell, she is lost in the rapture of this pleasure that you give her from the kiss, and to the point that she stops making sounds. You can only sense pleasure coming out of her.
After the emotions fade from her, she will actually pick up the girl and carry her and bring her to the servant, asking where she can lay the girl to rest.
Oh, I will take care of that.
Would you allow me?
I was instructed to take care of it, so that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to handle all of this. He seems almost fanatic in his response.
Thank you. And she will hand the girl over.
He lays her down. I'm going to catch up on this, and we are going to check in with Grey Rat.
It's at this moment that Grey Rat returns to the group as if the normal things of feeding have progressed, and those standing closest to him can hear the licking of lips and the moving of his teeth beneath his steel iron mask.
Kind of into the middle distance, Daborah will say, kind of plucking at her dress, I suspect that all of us have a different sense of what appearances needs to be. But I definitely feel for a change of circumstance.
Let me send you something, Grey Rat. Make a conscience roll. difficulty 9. And I'll also send you something. Alright. So, at long last, as the last of you finishes feeding in the unique manners you each do, you see that Sheriff Timbers has returned to the keep. He has returned to the keep, and true to his brisk walk, he's making a straight line across the hall to the chapel, to the group of you as you form up.
Galfred does not so much form up as he remains at one corner of the room, his arms crossed over his chest, satisfied, but not quite satisfied, if that makes sense. He has a somewhat stormy look on his face, very dark and grim.
Seeing that most of you are gathered up, he pauses briefly when he realizes that John is gone. I'll find him at another point. He grits his teeth. All right, listen up. Adam may have pardoned you, but that does not mean you have won any grace from me. You are my hounds in this investigation, and you will do as I say. There is a plague bearer in the city, and there's some lunatic bringing mobs of villagers and farmers to Canaanites. We are going to find both and bring them in staked, and by we, I mean you. If we succeed, and I decide you have not been a giant thorn in my fucking side, you may or may not receive credit for helping. If you do become a giant thorn in my fucking side, I will put your ass on the ground, and you will spend a century staked in the dirt.
I suspect that if you plan to be a thorn in your side, we'll be a stake in your side.
Galfred looks up at that comment as it was verging on a threat.
Oh, she didn't verge on a threat. That was very direct. She's kind of headed at this point.
The sheriff looks at you, and you see this frozen face with his eyebrows raised in disbelief. And I should reiterate, this is a tall man. He towers over you head and shoulders by several feet as he looks down at you. Is that right?
I believe you still have my penknife.
He continues to stare at you with his wild eyes. He eventually reaches from behind and pulls out your knife. He holds it out for you. He holds it out towards you.
Blade or handle?
Handle.
Mm-hmm. She will accept it.
He stops just short of letting you have it and pulls it back.
Mm-hmm. As if it was going to drop to the ground?
No, as though he never intended fully to give it to you.
Ah,
And,
yes.
and
okay.
he looks at you. He hasn't broken his gaze on you since your comment.
Sheriff, I have no problems with serving you in this. But would it not be better if we do this accommodating one another and with a certain measure of grace, perhaps?
I don't deal with this city's problems by asking everyone to give me grace, or by giving them my own. I expect that you will fall in line. I do not need much reason to put you down. And at this, he hands you your knife.
Understood, Sheriff. I will do my best to be at your service.
Gritting his teeth and looking back to the rest of you, are there any questions so far?
At this point, Grey Rat is gonna interject. Do I get my knives back?
He pulls out a satchel and tosses it to you on the ground, or tosses it on the ground towards you. It makes a clanking of metal sounds.
I have a question. Galfred speaks up from the corner where he is brooding silently up until now.
Of course you do.
Is there any evidence this plague bearer and the attack upon the Elysium are connected?
From where I can see, I don't believe so. But we should not rule it out immediately.
Is the plague natural, or perhaps could it be magical in nature? Have the bodies been examined by someone with the learning to do so?
From what I understand, the kind, when they find those who have died from the plague, will burn the bodies. However, on occasion, some kind die before their symptoms are apparent. They are buried by mistake. I do not know if this is natural or unnatural. I haven't seen any of these bodies myself. It must be relatively new to this city.
Do you know the symptoms of the plague? Have you seen it? And in Galfred pauses, knowing that he has stopped using layman's terms. Have you seen signs of the plague? He rephrases it.
No, it's been very quiet on the streets. I haven't seen any signs of illness at all. It was a very odd revelation that Simon has made to you all. There's really been no sign of plague whatsoever. This must be brand new.
So you have not personally seen one of the sick?
No, I have not. He turns his gaze to you, looking irritated.
Do you have any clues for us to follow on the attack on Elysium? Any leads?
We only have a few leads right now. Gacy's two oldest ghouls, the caretakers of that disused tavern, went missing. They might know something if we could find them. As for the plague bearer, find out which Canaanites haven't been seen lately, track them down, and the cemetery may be looking into. As I mentioned, occasionally the kind will bury plague victims by mistake.
I see. Very little to go on then.
At the moment it seems that way. But in 1 week's time, you are to return here with whatever findings we have. We will reassess. If something more urgent occurs before then, find me sooner.
Of course, Sheriff. Galfred says almost wearily.
Any other questions? Then I am off. He turns to leave unless anyone looks like they're about to speak up.
Daborah will be quiet.
Grey Rat remains stiff and quiet as he seems content to have his weaponry back.
Galfred's dark, sunken eyes follow the sheriff as he walks out of the room.
Tito seems lost in thought.
And at this point, you all are apparently, finally, free to do as you please, free to pursue this investigation as you best see fit. For the first time in several nights, you've regained your true agency. We're going to wrap up the session, but before we go, what are some of your characters' plans going forward? What are you thinking?
Galfred has a few things in mind. He would never assume to take leadership of this little group of Cainites, but although he supposed he wouldn't object if others were to follow him. His initial plan is either to examine the plague victims to determine the nature of the plague, whether it is natural or magical, and his other thought was to hunt down the relatives and family of the peasants involved in the attack on Elysium. An attack of that organized size could not have happened without a good deal of planning and a good deal of meeting, or at least not without others knowing of it, and perhaps chasing down that lead to the organizer of the mob.
Daborah is, well, she agrees with your assessment, but she feels that it's probably best to look directly at the plague victims first and then try and backtrack whether they have people in common that may have transferred it, trying to figure out what transfers it, things like that. She's more interested in checking that trail of evidence if possible at all. She feels that although the second thing, the assault on Elysium, is quite important as well, that it is actually not our remit at the moment, and that there are probably other people looking into that. If we want to avoid the anger of the sheriff, well, not that she makes it much easier, but still, we probably should try and get some early successes with actually finding something out about the plague. And also, I posted an out-of-character question in Roll20. I have a vague recollection that we heard something from Simon that the plague bearer may be one of the kindred, but it's been so long that I just don't recall it well enough. Was that the case? Was that not the case?
Yes, he did say something to the effect of he thought that the source of the plague was perhaps a Cainite, but it wasn't clear in his vision whether or not that was the case.
Okay, in that case, Daborah will directly address Galfred. Sorcerer, am I correct that your house has the ability to trace blood back to its source?
Before you say that, make intelligence occult to even approach this subject.
Okay.
Difficulty is going to be 7.
And that's fair enough.
Okay. Yeah, you are at least you're actually nominally familiar with things you've heard that the Tremere have done for other Canaanites in the past. Maybe not here, but other places. It's a question you can ask.
Okay. So the question was asked. Because if
Galfred,
the... Mhm.
Galfred looks up and replies rather cryptically, "We are capable of a great many things."
I was wondering whether the cause of the disease was some kind of corrupted gift, if you wish, if not curse of the blood. And if so, whether we could be affected by it as well. But we may need to keep it in mind when we start to investigate victims of this plague.
It is possible. Galfred speaks up.
So,
I was educated in the ways of the four humours at Oxford University, and the body, and its maladies and different mishaps that can take place within. As long as
Okay.
we avoid contact with the contaminated blood, however, we should be relatively safe. I only need to examine one of the plague bodies to determine the nature of this disease. I'm confident in my expertise to do so.
The teachings of Galen. It is pleasing to have someone so erudite among us. But yes, all the same, the blood, if the disease is an effect of the blood itself may also tell us much. But I have little insight in this if the victim is already dead. If they are still alive, perhaps I can figure things out, but if they are still dead, there may still be blood that can tell you things that others of us would not be able to ascertain.
Blood is but one of the four humours. The body has many different humours in it, all of which can be affected by malady. But a body is certainly what I need, on that we agree.
I'm looking forward to working with you on this.
Galfred pauses, but then offers a nod in return.
Wonderful. I believe you two should start out with the plague victims. Tito speaks up. I will investigate the families and relatives of who was involved in the attack.
And I will do my part as well to learn all I can.
The vision seemed to indicate there was a singular cause of the plague, but I do not think that it said that the plague could only spread from one source. So I don't know whether we can backtrace it to this singular source.
It will be difficult to find our patient zero. Indeed.
Still, perhaps we can find a map of the city so we can indicate where victims have been found and as such where it may have originated. That would be good to ask the sheriff for this, I suspect. If anyone, he would have a map. We should also check the docks. If this arrived in the city from outside, it more than likely arrived by way of the river.
Some good suggestions there.
It is unfortunate, perhaps, that the kindred that controlled most of the riverside has passed away in the attack. We should see whether we can get a hold of information in his remains. It may be awkward to do so. He is of my bloodline, but I believe there is a certain enmity between his sire and myself, so I'll have to be careful.
All right. So you are still free to go. Does anyone else speak up, or do you end up leaving?
Galfred seems content to remain silent, and when he feels the moment is appropriate, he will leave his perch in the corner of the room and turn to leave, setting about his task almost immediately.
Alright, so you see Galfred get up and start to leave.
Daborah is planning to go to her mansion to get in touch again with her servants and such, make sure that everything is alright and that they know that everything is alright. Also see whether messages have been left behind, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Greyrat will also take his leave as he begins to put his plan into motion, although he has not expressed any desire to share with the others what that might be.
And Tito will take his leave of the group.
Alright, so the four of you depart from the Tower of London, and you notice that the black clouds that swirled overhead as you entered, just as promised, are now delivering rain as you feel the pitter-patter of raindrops come down. But we are going to stop here because we are right at 10. So that's perfect. We can quickly get our votes for best role player tonight, or most entertaining, I should say.
All right, excellent.